Genesis says Adam was the first man God ever made, the first human being to open his eyes on this earth. Read closely, though, and the text itself keeps hinting that someone else was already here before him. Let us make man in our image, God says, before Eden even exists, before a single blade of grass has grown. Us. Who else was already there, listening? And when Adam's own son is banished for murder, he doesn't beg quietly. He says, in plain fear, that other people out there will kill him, people who, according to the family tree Genesis gives us, shouldn't exist yet at all. For 1,000 years, rabbis argued in the margins over exactly what these gaps meant. In 1655, one scholar finally said the quiet part out loud in print and watched his own book burn for it. By the end of this account, you'll see exactly what the plural word, the fearful son, and the banned book were all circling, and what it actually meant, in this text, to be called the first. It's the single most argued over word in the entire opening chapter of the Bible, one small word, 3 letters long, us. Genesis 1 verse 26, in full, then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Not I will make man. Not I am alone here. Us. Christian tradition would later read this as the Trinity speaking within itself, 3 persons in one voice. But that reading came centuries after Genesis was first written down, and it was never the only answer on the table. Ancient rabbis, writing long before that Christian reading ever existed, had an older answer of their own. God was speaking to someone who was already present in the room when he spoke. Not another God, but not nothing, either. The Talmud records the debate directly, in Tractate Sanhedrin. The sages argue that God consulted the ministering angels themselves before making man, asking their opinion first, the way a king consults his own court. It isn't an isolated idea, either. Job describes the sons of God presenting themselves before the Lord. The Psalms describe God standing in the midst of a divine assembly, a heavenly court, unnamed and uncounted, long before Adam is ever formed. Other ancient readers seized on the very same verse for the opposite reason. Sectarians pointed to us as proof that more than one power ruled in heaven, and the sages had to answer that challenge head-on, insisting the plural was humility, not company. It's a strange thing to picture either way, heaven already crowded with witnesses, or already crowded with controversy, before the first human being has taken a single breath. And thus is only the first crack in the account. The next one is harder to explain away. Turn the page, and Genesis tells the story of man's creation a second time, and not quite the same way the first time told it. In chapter 1, on the 6th day, God creates Adam, a Hebrew word meaning humankind, male and female together, in a single verse, as the last piece of an already finished world. In chapter 2, the account restarts almost from scratch. One specific man is formed from the dust of one particular garden, and given breath directly, alone, before any woman or any world beyond that garden's walls is even mentioned. Ancient and medieval readers noticed the seam between the 2 accounts. 2 different Hebrew verbs for create. 2 different scales, one describes an entire population, the other a single individual in one enclosed place. Some read it as the same event told twice, the second telling simply zoomed in closer. Others, across centuries of commentary, were never fully convinced the text meant the exact same moment at all. If chapter 1's Adam really is humanity in general, and chapter 2's Adam is one specific man singled out afterward and given a name, a garden, and a command, then the question isn't really whether someone came first. The text may already be telling you they did. That question gets much harder to set aside 2 chapters later, in the very next generation, with Adam's own son. Cain kills his brother Abel in a field. God curses him to wander the earth, and Cain's response is immediate, almost desperate, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Then he says the part that stops careful readers cold, generation after generation, whoever finds me will kill me. Finds him where? Kills him how? By the plainest count in Genesis, Adam, Eve, and their 2 sons are the only 4 people who have ever existed. On that count, there is no one left out there to fear at all. Tradition points to a later verse for the answer. Genesis chapter 5 mentions, almost in passing, that Adam had other sons and daughters, unnamed, uncounted, and never given a single line of their own story. It's a real resolution, and most later readers accepted it. Except it arrives one full chapter after Cain has already left, settled in the land of Nod, and married someone the text hasn't accounted for yet. That closes the family tree problem, at least on paper. But the very next verse in Genesis makes the mystery stranger, not simpler. Genesis for verse 17 is one sentence long, easy to skim past without a second thought, and it quietly changes the scale of the entire early world. Cain built a city, it reads, and called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. A city, named, deliberately, for one specific, real person. Not a tent. Not a household. A named, built settlement, raised by a family that, on paper, numbers maybe 5 or 6 people in total. Ancient cities weren't symbolic gestures. They needed sustained labor, defense against real threats, trade with someone, a population large enough to actually need walls in the first place. The text doesn't pause to explain who filled it. It simply assumes there's someone there to fill it, and moves straight on, as if the reader already understood the answer. For a book that traces every single generation from Adam to Noah in careful, unbroken order, this is a strange gap to leave wide open, and the rabbis who came after Genesis noticed it too. Some of them went much further than a missing census, far further than genealogy alone could explain. Some of them asked whether this was even the first world God had ever tried to build. It's one of the strangest surviving lines in the entire Midrash, the vast body of ancient rabbinic commentary written to explain, question, and expand on the plain text of Genesis. Rabbi Abahu, writing generations after the temple in Jerusalem had already fallen, taught that God did not simply make this world once, in one attempt, and succeed on the first try. God created worlds and destroyed them, the teaching goes, until he created this one and said, "This one pleases me, those did not please me." Worlds, plural. Destroyed, plural. The rabbis weren't offering this as poetry, they were wrestling honestly with something real sitting inside the text itself, a God who tries, discards the attempt, and starts over, more than once. It isn't a claim about other humans, exactly. It's older and stranger than that, a tradition that this world, and whoever might have lived and died in it, may not have been the first attempt God ever made. The rabbis never say what those earlier worlds looked like, or who, if anyone, walked through them before this one began. That silence is deliberate. But later, less careful readers tried to fill it in anyway. Long before those later readers ever picked up the question, though, one ancient book had already tried to fill in Genesis's gaps directly, on purpose, line by line. The Book of Jubilees, written more than 2,000 years ago, retells the whole of Genesis in far more detail than the original ever gives it names, dates, and relationships the plain text simply skips. It gives Cain's wife an actual name, Ethiopian, his own sister. It names other early clans, other unions, other settlements scattered across the land, treating the early world as fuller and busier than Genesis alone ever lets on. It survived complete in only one place on earth, the Ethiopian Bible. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church never dropped it. To this day it sits inside their 81-book canon as scripture, the same canon that also preserved the Book of Enoch whole. Jubilees wasn't a fringe curiosity, either. Fragments of it were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, hidden by the community at Qumran, and it was read, copied, and quoted by both Jewish and early Christian writers for centuries, even after most Western Bibles quietly left it out. It isn't claiming outright that a whole separate humanity existed before Adam, but it is filling in the exact same silences the plain Genesis text leaves open, the same ones that made careful readers uneasy enough to start asking questions in the first place. Which raises its own question: if the book meant to smooth over Genesis's gaps only ends up making the population problem more explicit, not less, what does that really say about the gaps themselves? In 1655, one scholar in France decided these gaps weren't just literary curiosities. He decided they were historical evidence. His name was Isaac La Peyrere, a French Calvinist scholar of Jewish descent, and he built his entire case on a strange, easily overlooked line buried in Paul's letter to the Romans. Sin was in the world before the law, Paul writes, and death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over those who had not sinned in the likeness of Adam's transgression. If death reigned over people who hadn't broken Adam's specific command, La Peyrere argued, in his own private reading of that verse, then those people had to have existed before Adam's line began and entirely outside it. He called them Pre-Adamites and published the theory under his own name in a book titled Pre-Adamite. He wasn't trying to reject scripture, he believed he was finally reading Paul's own words as literally as they demanded. The book spread fast, reprinted and smuggled across Protestant Europe within its very first year, passed hand to hand even as Catholic authorities in multiple countries moved quickly to suppress it. The church did not agree with him. Copies of his book were burned publicly in more than one city, and La Peyrere himself was arrested in Brussels, then forced to travel to Rome and recant before the Pope in person, just to save his own life. He recanted publicly, but the theory itself didn't disappear with him. It resurfaced again and again in scholarly debate for the next 3 centuries. He had just said, too plainly and far too early, a question this text had been quietly asking all along. Because a much older Jewish tradition, centuries older than La Peyrere and his condemned book, had already been quietly circling something adjacent to his exact question, but just never once stated in those precise terms. Kabbalists spoke of Adam Kadmon, a primordial, cosmic Adam, formed before the physical world was even fully in place, an archetype, a pattern of divine light, more than a flesh and blood person. In Lurianic Kabbalah especially, Adam Kadmon is described as the very first configuration of divine light itself. The shape all subsequent creation, including the earthly Adam formed later in the garden, was patterned after. This isn't the same claim as another race of humans quietly walking the earth. It's stranger than that, a being that exists prior to matter itself, not a rival population competing with Adam for the title of first. But it shows the exact same instinct running quietly through 1,000 years of Jewish and Christian thought, in tradition after tradition. Whenever the text says the first, sooner or later, someone asks first compared to what, exactly? Angels present at the us. Worlds tried and destroyed before this one. A city Cain shouldn't have had the hands to build. A cosmic Adam standing before the earthly one. None of these traditions agree with each other on the details. But not one of them comes from nowhere. Every single one grows directly out of a real seam sitting inside a text that never fully, cleanly closes its own gaps. So which is it? Was there truly someone here on this earth before Adam, or has the text simply always been more careful and stranger than a simple first man story ever let on? Here's what all of these scenes actually point to, once you finally step back and line every single one of them up together, in order. Every one of these puzzles, the plural voice, the 2 accounts, Cain's fear, the city, the destroyed worlds, the missing wife's name, is really a question about what came before Adam, not a question about what Adam himself actually was. Genesis never actually calls Adam the first human being who ever lived. It calls him the man God forms, names, places in a garden, and holds to one specific command, the first one made personally accountable to God, by name. That's a considerably narrower claim than first person on earth. And it's the one single thing every version of this story of Genesis, the Midrash, Jubilees, even La Peyrere's condemned book actually agrees on, without real contradiction. Everyone else who appears anywhere in these accounts stays a shadow at the edge of the frame, an unnamed sister, an unnamed wife, an unnamed city full of unnamed people, an unnamed world that may have come and gone before this one ever began. Adam is the one who gets named, the one God turns toward directly, and speaks to, out of everyone and everything else in the account. Maybe that was the real distinction Genesis was drawing all along, underneath everything else, not who came first in time, but who was finally, deliberately, called by name. And that, quietly, without any fanfare at all, is what this account was always asking you to notice.